Let's talk about cybersecurity. Now, what is cybersecurity? Well, generally when we talk about cybersecurity today, in organizations at least, we're referring to a set of technologies and processes that organizations use to protect things like systems, networks, individual devices, software applications, and of course data from attacks, damage, or unauthorized access. Now, it's important to remember that from the perspective of a lot of malicious hackers, the cybersecurity landscape actually represents a burgeoning criminal enterprise, a for-profit enterprise. This is why we can't leave our cybersecurity readiness to chance. It's also important to understand that because digital technologies are so very pervasive in society today, the need for cybersecurity strategies that includes the protection of personal data, privacy, and safety. It covers nearly every aspect of our life, work, and everything that we do. It's crucial. Well, to understand how cybersecurity works, we need to understand the basic types of threats that businesses face today in the digital landscape. And by the way, this space is constantly evolving, so we have to stay alert. First, there's malware, which is short for malicious software. This is a file or a code that's typically delivered over a network, and it infects, explores, steals, and conducts malicious behavior on behalf of an attacker. Viruses are a type of malware. Ransomware is a criminal business model that uses malicious software to hold critical files, data, or information for ransom. Organizations that are victim of ransomware attacks can have their entire operation shut down. There are phishing attacks, and these are email-based attacks that are disguised as legitimate messages. The fraudulent email tricks the recipient into responding by luring them in to click a link, open an attachment, or directly provide really sensitive information. There are application attacks. These are sophisticated attacks directed at specific software applications or systems. Now, these are some of the hardest attacks to detect and shut down because the attack is already deep inside an organization's systems and software. Now, apart from these threats, there's also the misuse of personal data, occasionally with our permission. So, for example, you're probably familiar with the recent Facebook Cambridge Analytica data scandal where personal information from millions of Facebook users was collected and used to influence voter opinions in political campaigns. Now, technically, this was all allowed, but ethically, it was very dubious. So data analytics and data mining have traditionally been sort of a regulatory gray area, but the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal and the violation of trust that represented via Facebook is starting to change the views of policymakers. For example, in the UK, where Cambridge Analytica was headquartered, the government there is spending £9 million on setting up a new center for data ethics and innovation. And they will be involved in policy writing and proposing new regulations. So watch this space very closely. The Economist Intelligence Unit has said that, according to their research, 92% of global consumers say they want to control what personal information is automatically collected. 57% of consumers say they want what is called the right to be forgotten. They see that as critically important. And 92% also want to see an increase in punishments and penalties for companies that violate consumer privacy. And when we think about data privacy, don't forget about the related topic of personal identity theft. This is the theft, sale, and misuse of our own personal data, especially financially related data like credit cards, bank accounts, brokerage account information. Privacy and identity theft are incredibly important topics for businesses and consumers because when personal identifiers get into the hands of bad actors and as the result of breaches at an organizational level or through being attacked as an individual, the results can be really devastating, and it's very difficult to get your identity back under your own control. Even though there are a number of companies that offer services and insurance that specifically target risk management and remedies for identity theft, these are no substitute for diligence and quick response. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Now, on another front, with the increase of IoT devices, cybersecurity is even more important, since a breach of security here could have devastating consequences. Take, for instance, if someone could hack into your home security camera on a personal level. But how about utility grids or services like electricity, water, or natural gas on a societal level? Now, there are companies that are looking at how a digital technology like blockchain could be used as a way to better track, validate, and secure devices in an Internet of Things ecosystem. Now, we've also seen some interesting advances in personal device protection. You see this, of course, in smartphones that are incorporating facial recognition, iris scanning, fingerprint scanning. All this is to increase the security of these personal devices because they contain so much of our valuable personal data. However, there are these emerging threats in the political realm, as well as abundant privacy issues in social media. So we have to remain diligent as consumers. It's important to realize that you will be attacked. Cybersecurity is not about establishing a posture to avoid attack. In this connected environment, it would be impossible. Cybersecurity is about managing the risks through quick and decisive responses. Well, cybersecurity has been a top concern of business leaders, government leaders for quite some time. And keeping pace with a cybersecurity strategy and operation can be a huge challenge, particularly in government and large corporate networks, where in their most disruptive form, cyber threats often take aim at secrets, political, military, infrastructural assets, at nations, and at citizens. And one mistake that business leaders tend to make is that they assume that once a cybersecurity strategy has been established, investments have been made in cybersecurity protection, and all those proverbial boxes have been ticked, that the organization has mitigated the risk. In reality, organizations are constantly under attack and are in a cyber war zone each and every day. Rather than waiting for a cyber attack to breach the walls of the organization, which, by the way, could be devastating to the business or the organization, a better approach is to assume that attacks are happening all the time, which they are. These attacks can be managed through software and systems that have the ability to detect both known and unknown threats. McKinsey puts it this way: cyber risk is a complex, non-financial issue with the power to erode a company's bottom line and brand value. They go on to point out that 75% of executives say they consider cybersecurity a top priority, but only 16% of those executives feel that they're well prepared to withstand a cyber attack. Now, a recent Harvard Business Review article pointed out that roughly a quarter of all breaches come from internal sources. In industries that handle highly sensitive and valuable information like healthcare, government, or scientific operations, the proportion of internal troublemakers is very high. But places like restaurants or retailers, they see more activity from outside attacks. Now, on the regulatory front, there are a wide variety of policies that have been introduced to try to protect consumers. Things like the Personal Data Protection Act, or the PDPA in Singapore, or the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which has been in the news in the EU. All of these things aim to protect the personal data and privacy of citizens. So how can software and systems that are used in cybersecurity strategies detect these unknown threats? That's an opportunity. Now, the answer is actually quite clever. It's by leveraging artificial intelligence and predictive analytics technologies. Now, unique variations of machine learning and deep learning approaches are being deployed by various cybersecurity vendors to allow organizations to use AI to accelerate the detection of cyber threats and to accelerate and automate responses to threats and attacks. AI is even being used to identify, quantify, and communicate business risks that are tied to cybersecurity requirements. AI is being used to provide real-time information and situational awareness to organizations about the ongoing state of their cybersecurity defenses and how attacks are being managed or handled. As a part of a complete cybersecurity strategy, organizations are working with insurance companies to transfer some of the potential financial risk to those insurers. Now, this can cover damage to digital assets, business interruptions, and there's a greater opportunity for insurance companies to help chief information security officers to educate their business leaders about how serious cybersecurity threats are and how a cybersecurity strategy must be a core part of any business strategy or business architecture. More and more countries are requiring companies to go public just as soon as a data breach is detected. So having all of the bases covered from a technology perspective, education to cyber insurance, that's just smart risk management. Now, according to Forbes, organizations worldwide, they're spending a small fortune on cyber at around 170 billion US dollars each year in total on protection. That's a lot of money. And the reason so much money is being spent on cybersecurity is that the downside risks and long-term damage to the organization is almost limitless, up to and including the loss of the business. Cybersecurity, as we see, is a huge issue. Gone are the days when the organization could view cybersecurity strictly as a risk mitigation exercise, where investments in software, firewalls, and other IT tools were considered enough. Major cybersecurity events cost organizations billions of dollars every single month. And the technology is certainly a part of the solution, but the bigger opportunity is to align cybersecurity initiatives and approaches to broader business objectives.